In autumn of 1940, the Royal Navy began entertaining the idea of using carrier-based aircraft to attack the Italian ships based at Taranto, which was a natural safe haven due to its shallow waters. This idea originated from the mid-1930s, when the Royal Navy first conceived that it would have to destroy the Italian fleet in a future war, but the idea really never gained momentum until late 1940, but fortunately for the Royal Navy, they had been training their pilots to drop torpedoes at shallow depths. As the plan came together, it was decided that the aircraft carriers Illustrious and Eagle would use Swordfish biplanes in attack on the 21st of October, 1940. But there was a fire on board the Illustrious, which destroyed a few aircraft, and so the plan had to be cancelled and rescheduled to mid-November. However, another alteration would have to occur in the plan, as, on the 12th of October 1940, while escorting a convoy, the Eagle was damaged by near-bomb misses, which caused leaks in its aviation fuel system that were discovered on the 5th of November. As a result, the carrier was not able to participate in the operation. In order to maximize the amount of aircraft that Illustrious would carry, 5 Swordfish and 8 of their crews were transferred from the Eagle to the Illustrious to participate in the attack, bringing the total number of operational aircraft to 24, and the operation would be named Judgment, and it was a sub-operation of MB-8. Between the 6th and 14th of November 1940, the Royal Navy was going to conduct 10 moves which would attempt to decapitate, if not destroy, the Italian fleet, and on the 11th of November it was anticipated that Illustrious would strike Taranto. On the 6th of November 1940, the Mediterranean fleet set sail, with the aircraft carrier Illustrious, battleships Warspite, Valiant, Malaya, Ramillies, the heavy cruiser York, and the light cruisers Ajax, Sydney, and Gloucester, along with 13 destroyers. Force H had also set sail, and this meant that the Royal Navy was active in both the east and western sections of the Mediterranean, and the Italians instantly took notice, but due to lacking information, they were unable to determine the exact movements and motives of the Royal Navy at that point, and so submarines were dispatched to scout certain checkpoints. On the 8th of November, steam was raised in their ships, but due to lacking accuracy of British movements, the Italian fleet failed to set sail. They would utilize submarines and aircraft over the 9th and 10th to attack the British with no results. At 1800, on the 10th of November, Operation Judgment would begin when the Illustrious, with Gloucester, Glasgow, York, and Berwick, along with 4 destroyers, would detach from the bulk of the Mediterranean fleet and sail north-northeast. The Italians failed to take notice that the Illustrious and several escorts had detached from the bulk of the Mediterranean fleet and were now headed towards Taranto. As a result, the Italians kept their ships at the base. This would be a fatal mistake for the Italians, as located in the Mar Grande was the 9th Division's Littorio and Vittorio Veneto, the 5th Division's Giulio Cesare and Conte di Cavour, and the 6th Division's Giulio and Andrea Doria, all of Italy's serviceable battleships. This vulnerability would be exploited to the fullest, starting at 20:35 on the 11th of November, 170 miles southeast of Taranto, as the first wave of 12 Swordfish would take off from Illustrious. 6 would have torpedoes, 4 bombs, and 2 flares. At 2300, the 2 Swordfish with the flares would arrive first, and finding that the weather was clear and ideal for an attack, they would drop their flares on the eastern shore of the Mar Grande, which would illuminate the Italian battleships from their rears. After the flares were dropped, the 4 Swordfish carrying the 250-pound armor-piercing bombs arrived on scene, and their purpose was diversionary, as they would attack the lighter vessels in Mar Piccolo, which was north of the Mar Grande. One of their bombs would find its mark on the Lebeccio, though it failed to explode and only caused minor damage. While Mar Piccolo was being bombed, the 6 Swordfish with the torpedoes arrived on scene, and they set themselves up into 2 groups of 3. The first group would come from the southwest, flying over the Trentola breakwater. The second would come from the northwest, over Punta Rondinella. The first group flying over Trentola breakwater would attack the Conte di Cavour, and at 23:15, one torpedo struck the vessel underneath the hull below the No. 2 magazine. The other two torpedoes would miss the Cavour, but continue on towards the Andrea Doria, but before reaching the Andrea Doria, they would hit mud and explode, causing no damage. The second group of swordfish flying over Punta Rondinella would attack the Littorio, and they would score 2 hits. The first torpedo would strike the vessel on the starboard side, just behind the No. 1 turret, blowing a 7.5-meter hole in the side of the ship. The second torpedo would explode under the hull, just aft of the steering gear room, blowing holes in both the port and starboard side at the stern, and also destroying the top edge of the rudder. Initially, it appeared that neither ship was in danger of sinking, but this was wrong, as progressive flooding was taking over the Cavour, and as a result, it was decided to attempt grounding the vessel. While this attempt was being made, it ended up succumbing to progressive flooding and was lost in the shallows. Fortunately, the much newer Littorio was able to contain the flooding and was in no danger of sinking, as was initially anticipated. In return for the sinking of the Cavour managed to actually shoot down the swordfish that landed the torpedo on it, but this was the only casualty the British would suffer in the first attack. At 21:28, Illustrious would launch a second wave of 9 swordfish, 6 carrying torpedoes, 1 a bomb, and 2 flares. This number was reduced as during takeoff, the aircraft carrying a bomb and one carrying a torpedo were damaged, but the one carrying the bomb was repaired and took off an hour later. At midnight, the 2 swordfish carrying the flares would arrive on scene first, and, just like the first wave, they would drop their flares on the eastern shore of Mar Grande. Immediately behind them were the 5 torpedo bombers, and they would attack from over Punta Rondinella. At 12:01 a.m., on the 12th of November, the Littorio was struck by a third torpedo on its bow ahead of the No. 1 main battery magazine, causing extensive flooding in the bow, necessitating the ship being grounded so that it did not sink, and unlike with the Cavour, this was successfully carried out. At the exact same time, a torpedo would strike Giulio on its starboard bow underneath the forward main battery magazines, causing extensive flooding, and, just like Littorio, it had to be grounded to prevent it from sinking. As for the 3 remaining torpedoes, the third aircraft would be shot down without dropping its torpedo. The fourth one would drop its torpedo, but it would miss its target and end up burying itself in the mud underneath the Vittorio, where it failed to explode, and the fifth torpedo, aimed at Vittorio Veneto, missed and exploded when contacting mud. A brief while later, the swordfish carrying the bomb would arrive on scene and attack Mar Piccolo, where it would drop its bomb and strike the cruiser Trento, though the bomb failed to explode and only caused minor damage. The results of the operation were extraordinary, as, by the closing of the 12th of November, not only had the Royal Navy sunk 1 Italian battleship and severely damaged 2 others, but Force X had managed to intercept and completely destroy a convoy. With the cards in his favor, Admiral Cunningham intended to attack Taranto again on the night of the 12th and 13th of November, but opted out of it due to poor weather conditions. As for the Italians, the disaster was clear, and all undamaged capital ships were relocated to different harbors. As for the human cost, 32 were killed aboard Littorio, 16 aboard Cavour, and 1 aboard the Giulio. Even though the attack itself was quite a shock to the Italians, what was even more of a surprise was the fact that the Cavour had sunk with only 1 torpedo hit and with its damage control operational. It was discovered that not only did the Italian battleships suffer from deficiencies, but all of Italy's warships suffered from poor watertight performance of ventilation systems, doorways, and bulkheads, along with ineffective damage control arrangements and vulnerable electrical components, which hindered any damage control capabilities. All of these deficiencies combined allowed progressive flooding to overtake the Italian ships without any effective resistance taking place. Following these deficiencies being made clear, they would be for the most part corrected on future Italian ships, with the exception of the electrical systems, which would remain vulnerable throughout the entirety of the war. With that having been said, I have nothing more I wish to add on to this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.